I think like one of the things that like local first technologies in general struggle with is the notion of a partial sync. It's like you got a big database, it's got a ton of data in there. Obviously, if you have like, a service with a million users or something, you're not going to be able to pull in, well, you wouldn't pull in all that data, but like generally just being able to pull in what you need is like a hard problem. It's like a not very well solved problem. That's one of their promises, which I think is it's kind of incredible, just to think about like, I'm thinking about database access. This thing's really going to be like smartly caching data that I look up and is like used frequently. So it's like a big part of their thing. And yeah, just like keeping the partial cache and like, I think I guess more to the point is just you not having to think about it. There's stuff locally, there's stuff at the database, and it's just going to do the right thing. That's going to be, it's going to be an incredible API. I'm really excited for it. I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. It's so. How did you? I mean, when you launched, you're very much talking about zero, sort of in lockstep with one, and just as you just discussed, it's like a sort of integral part of your long-term strategy with this. But what made you decide to like hook it so deeply into what you're trying to do? I mean, versus like, oh, here is a data fetching solution. Yeah.
Yeah, I we'll see like if it turns out to be the right thing. I think what I want, like, I think this is like going back to the Rails type thing, but I think why doesn't it work? Like why can't we have a modern Rails? And I think there's good reasons. Like I think that like we're solving much bigger and more complex problems with client side apps, than we did back in the day. So there's a lot more surface area. There's also just a lot more money in our industry, I think, and a lot more like people solving different types of problems. And so I just think that like it's a kind of a fool's errand to try and go in and say we're going to solve everything ourselves and you're going to love it. I just don't think you'll win, because I just don't, like, again, like look at Zero. It's like it's an entire startup and maybe more. Like they may not even pull it off, right? Like just because it's that hard. And so there's no chance that I'll ever do that while building a framework. But I thought I thought it was kind of nice to have this half step, this sort of like fuller stack framework, but not full, which is that if you follow this happy path, especially with data, I think data is really so deep. Like if you have this agreed data layer, I think it unlocks some really incredible stuff at the framework layer that we haven't even shown yet, that really will give you like these huge upgrades in sort of like user experience, developer experience, like productivity. And also I think like being slightly opinionated like that, where we do have this thing, like, Zero is still going to require quite a bit of setup and integration, and like the server rendering handoff is quite a bit of work to like get right and all this stuff. And so like, yeah, I think like we can solve a bunch of like bumps that you would normally run into if you weren't that opinionated. And like, I think we also like, yeah, can add a bunch of value beyond that. Like in terms of tooling and like interfaces for your data. Like I think kind of like understanding your schema and like letting you handle migrations very easily. And like kind of, I just think it like, there's very cool stuff, I think, beyond just Zero working that we can do in the future as like, our stack understands your data. And like, I just think that once you understand the data of the stack, there's a lot of cool tooling and like other kind of benefits that come along. And then I think like, yeah, I mean, you can inject, so like we don't want to be too opinionated. Like we totally want to work just like how any other framework does. But so I guess the final piece too is just like, if we're not doing server components, we do have to have, a solution. And so I think that's why we've sort of come out and said, like, we think that this is kind of the way forward. And then we do, we really do think that that's like the ideal setup. So, we do want to embrace other potential solutions if they do come out and we feel like they're working well. We'd like to make it easy to integrate with any of these other type of local first type. We've talked to a few other people that we're friends with that are working on, ones that have different trade-offs. But we think Zero kind of solves like the trade-offs in such a way that it works really well for most things. And so, if we want them to pull it off, we're aligned with them. And so that's why we thought it would be good. If other ones turn out to do well and solve it in different ways, maybe that are interesting to different types of people, we'll try and support them too. but yeah, like I just think like if we're not going to do server components, then we have to have something, and I think that this is nice. Like it lets our team focus on what we're good at, and they can focus on what they're good at, and we do have a good relationship, and so that helps it a lot.
You said there was some subset though of server components that you would want to support. What does that look like?
Well, because server components is a lot, right? Like it's sort of an umbrella of things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like we don't want our router to fundamentally be server driven. Like that would make things a lot harder for us. And I think for users and for people building apps, like especially local first style, like it just doesn't make sense. Like you want the cache and you want most of your stuff to be running client side ultimately. Um, in terms of like, I mean, yeah, your data is caching there and running there. And if you have your data already instantly available, if you have to do a round trip to the server to pull in like the next page and figure out what you're going to render, then you've kind of gotten rid of all that really great user experience that you get from local type apps. So it's kind of like that's the reasoning. And then I think though, like some of the bundle size stuff where like you can totally avoid bringing some of the some stuff into your bundle JavaScript and bringing it to the client. That's what I would like to bring in, and I think that that's doable. I think like what it could look like, and I don't know this actually fully yet. We haven't really dug into it yet. We've talked to a few people who work even on the React team and stuff about this, and so we have an idea of maybe how it could work. But um, it would either be almost like an inversion of the model in a sense, or just like a strict limitation on mixing trees. Because like right now with React server components, you can really mix things. Like you can like pass a server component to a client component and then pass that down, and it like you can sort of like mix in a very dynamic way. And what ours may be is like we have maybe even loaders, right? I think Remix was playing with just like having loaders. If you return JSX, then that's just like your static stuff that's not loaded. Like we could actually implement that. We've looked at it. It's not that hard to where you're not able to like mix the trees and like do this fancy kind of like stuff that server components lets you do, but you can just say like here's some JSX that we want to load in. It's got MDX in it, right? Like it's my static content. I'm not going to be able to like pass props through it or whatever, this crazy stuff that they let you do, but you can still avoid bringing that into your bundle. And so something like that is what I imagine.
I mean, a lot of the features that you've sort of like outlined in the docs, I think are like pretty strong. I mean, you've done like a lot of incredible stuff. So it's like typed routes, which I really appreciate because it's like it's deceptively tricky to like generate types for a router. Another thing, this is like just like a fallout of something that I really appreciate. So you have this way of defining. You can define like overall if your app is like SPA or server side generated or whatever. But you can also do that per page, which is like pretty typical of meta frameworks. They like a lot of them let you choose. But I like specifically how you encode it in the file name. So it's like name of file plus like the thing. That's actually pretty incredible because a lot of the meta frameworks is like you're exporting some variable inside or something. It's like written inside the file. And you have to kind of like remind yourself, or at least I do, like clicking back through is like, okay, like what is the style of this thing? And like, find the thing. And I like how you've laid it out to be really scannable. What do you think are like other features or other things that you've done that sort of like innovated on the way that people build frameworks? I mean, aside from the very obvious, like, oh, this works for React Native, which is like not to be discounted. Are there any other like big things under the hood that you're really proud about that like might not jump out to people immediately?
Honestly, I don't want to like try and reach too much. Like I really think that um I mean, again, like, one is early, and I've been working on this as I had a full-time job and a full-time side project. So it's my second full-time side project. So I am full-time on it now. And we've got our little team that's bootstrapped and makes some money. So I think we have enough focus to really give it the love that it deserves. But I won't really claim that we have, too much more than that. I mean, I think there's a lot of polish for being an early project. I think there's a lot of like refinement. I think the fact that you can get perfect first loads, perfect next page loads with preloading all the, it preloads the loaders, it preloads the next page contents. It's super fast. It's easy to serve in production with a single command. Like, I think if you just compare it even to existing frameworks today, like something like a Remix, like, I think it does really well, actually. It's surprisingly well. And it works, really. And like, we've also done things like, we're using React Navigation, but it can be a little bit heavy. We've actually slimmed it down quite a bit by replacing certain heavy dependencies with our own version. So like, I think a lot of the stuff that we've done comes down to just like refining the kind of what's there, and actually making it really quite good for being this early. And then yeah, again, like, yeah, the per page stuff is really cool. I think that's kind of one thing that we really focused on and tried to get it to work really well. I think the React Native thing was huge. Like, that was a huge investment. So the React Native support is kind of like the big piece in the future. And then like, yeah, I think again, like leaning on zero, we're trying to, like, I think our thing in the long run that we want to push is like, we're not trying to complicate things. We're trying to keep things simple and give you like this slightly opinionated stack that really lets you move fast and do things that you couldn't do before, like, shared cross-platform apps. And so I think that's where we're going to stay. We've got loaders from Remix. We did implement that ourselves, but it's nothing new. So yeah, I think above that, so I've sort of alluded to dev tooling. I think that's something that no frameworks are really doing that well. I think there's some cool stuff to come there in terms of just like great kind of like tools that will come out of the box, especially if you do opt into zero, that give you a lot of like fun superpowers that you wouldn't have on day one with anything else. So I think we'll have more to come, but I think it's enough that we just have React Native, and it works really well for web as well.